Hello everybody, it's Joe the Jester here, and I just wanted to say, today we're doing something a little bit different. Now, we're not doing like any gaming video or anything. Today, we're going to be doing a tier list of all Godzilla movies. All of them. All the way from 1954 to 2023. So, of course, we have our tiers. I'll go over them. We got God, we got King, we got Good, we got Okay, we got Mid, bad, and didn't watch. Yeah, there are Godzilla movies I have not watched, just because I can't really find them. But either way, let's just get this started with the original Godzilla from 1954, Instant God movie. The message is portrayed in such a way that no other film has done up to this point, and it's incredibly dark, and I do really like it. So, I give it that. Uh, Moving on, we got Godzilla Raids Again, which is a very mid movie. It was very rushed. It was probably the rushiest Godzilla film, and you can kind of see nothing really interesting really happened in the film besides the introduction of Anguirus. So it's just a mid movie. Next one we got King Kong versus Godzilla, and this one is actually kind of good, honestly. This one is not bad, but it's also a pretty good milestone in the franchise. So I'm placing it into the good tier because it definitely increased Godzilla's popularity over in the U.S. and in Japan. And the next one is a personal favorite of mine, Mothra versus Godzilla, and I'm actually gonna place this over the 1954 film. While the 1954 film is definitely a classic, I do think versus Mothra is definitely more nostalgic for me, just because it was the first film I ever saw, like when I was really little. So yeah, it's going in there. Next one is King Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster, and this movie is actually okay. Like, I mean, I do really like the idea of the film, like all like the big four monsters, like big names at the time, like Godzilla, King Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra, just teaming up. And like I don't know what I'm trying to say. This movie's good, and plus it's definitely a good stepping stone for Godzilla's history. Next one is Invasion of Astro Monster, and this one is also a good film. Definitely a pretty good one, but not as good as King Kong vs. Godzilla. The reason why I say this is because this movie has the least amount of time for Godzilla in this. And for a movie to have Godzilla in it, you must give me Godzilla in the film. But I think it's a pretty good film. All the actors did a solid job. Now, next up is Ebra Horror of the Deep, and I actually kind of like this one, to be honest. Now, Ebra Horror of the Deep is not like an absolute like king movie, but I think it's a really good movie. I'm actually gonna place this above Invasion of Astro Monster just because I feel like it's the perfect summer Godzilla film. Because I feel like the island setting is kind of neat, and even though Godzilla's suit is practically tearing apart, and plus he acts like King Kong in the film, I do really like a little bit of his role. Okay, so next up is Son of Godzilla, and this is actually a pretty solid film. Say what you will about Manila, but I think he's really good and also kind of adorable. And the ending scene is just amazing. 10 out of 10, easily. Um, Next up, so I'm placing, what am I saying? Next up we got Destroy All Monsters, which is the like the final film, the Showa, like not the final film, but the final era in that timeline. But this is also a really good movie. I'm placing this on the King tier because I just feel like it does like a bunch of stuff like from the Toast cinematic universe kind of up to that point. We got like so many familiar faces, and while Godzilla and other monsters are not in it that much, that doesn't mean that this is a horrible film. So I placed it in the King tier. Next up is All Monsters Attack, and even though some people place it in the bad tier, I think it's actually an okay film. Like, it's not as good as Ghidorah, but it's definitely a good film to introduce children to Godzilla. Though I will admit, it is kinda dumb, a little bit. Next up is Godzilla vs. Ghidorah. Well, this movie is also a pretty solid film. I'm actually gonna put this in the good tier, like, also above Invasion of Astro Monster, just because I feel like this was the point where Godzilla became more of a general audience movie, because there's more like kiddie scenes in it. Plus, the reason why I put this in the good tier is that this is the movie that Godzilla hecking flies. So, yeah. Okay. Next up is Godzilla vs. Gigan, and this movie is also kind of good. Like, basically, the 70s movies were kind of good and also kind of great. Just kind of underrated. So, Godzilla vs. Gigan is, I will admit, a better film than Hedorah, just because I don't know if Godzilla was really in it that much, and they didn't really have that many fights in it. Just because, like, Godzilla was just, like, standing there. while Godzilla vs. Gigan just kind of has like them all just brawling out, and I do really like it. Yeah. Anyways, the next one I have is Godzilla vs. Megalon, and this is a king movie in my books. Definitely a good, definitely one of my favorite films. Just because it's just fun to watch. It's just kind of like a fun film. It has to be the funnest film I have probably have seen, and it's definitely a good watch in my books. Yeah. Next one is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, another good movie, and I'm placing this right in the middle. But this is honestly a really solid film. Definitely when the point where Godzilla started to get treated seriously again, and that continued with Terror of Mechagodzilla. And this movie is okay, I'll say. It's not bad, but it was decent, and it was probably like the first movie I ever saw like G-Fest or something. I'm actually gonna place this lower than Ghidorah, just because it felt a bit dark for the end of the show here, but that's the way Godzilla started, and hey ho. Now we move on to the Heisei series with The Return of Godzilla, and to be honest, I have not watched this film. I tried searching, I have Amazon, and I tried watching it, but it always said, you can't watch it. It's just, for some reason, I can't really find it, so, oh, sorry, but I did not watch. And the same goes for Godzilla vs. Biollante, unfortunately, so I'm placing this into the did not watch category since I did not even watch it. Sorry, Biollante fans. Okay. Now, but Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, I did watch, and it's a pretty solid film. Like, the acting and directing was really good. It was definitely, like, the best, like, idea for a, what am I trying to say? Oh, their 30th anniversary, like, Toho Studios, the creators of Godzilla, they all did that. That was a pretty solid film. And plus, and while the time travel plot is confusing, it does make this film a bit unique from the other ones. Okay, next up we have Godzilla vs. Mothra, a pretty good movie. But I will admit it's a bit decenter, a bit less good than Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, so I'm placing this into the okay tier. Yeah, just because there wasn't really that much really in the film. There was just kind of a few, well, filler plots, but I do really like the ending scene where all of them just fought. That was pretty fun. And I do like the introduction of Batra. And next up is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, another really good film in the franchise. This is where, like, the point where Godzilla was basically, all the films were pretty good after this, like, through the Heisei era. So, placing this in the good tier, just because, above King Ghidorah, actually above King Kong vs. Godzilla, just because I feel like this film had more of, like, a story than, like, King Kong vs. Godzilla. Well, the story, like, King Kong vs. Godzilla story is, like, make these two monsters fight, and Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 was kind of like, basically, like, more, like, stories that basically connected in with each other, basically. So I'm placing this into the top of the good tier. Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla is also a pretty good film, though not as good as, like, other films. But it's a pretty solid film. Definitely an underrated one in my books, but it's a pretty solid film. Next up is Godzilla vs. Destroyer, and let me tell you, this is a king movie by all regards. Basically, the ending of the Heisei series couldn't be any better. Godzilla's death is very tragic and heartwarming, and that ending scene is just perfect in my books. So yeah, that is an amazing scene. Next up is Godzilla 1988, and this movie is just bad. It's just bad. Now, I have to say before watching this, if you grew up watching this film, or this was your first ever time watching Godzilla from this film, go ahead. If you like this film, go ahead and like it. I can't stop you for that. But this is just not a good movie in my books. It basically kind of butchers what Godzilla was meant to be like, and I feel like his design is just kind of too animalistic. It just doesn't fit him. Though, with a few tweaks, I would say it could be a good design, but it just doesn't fit me. And the other stuff was just kind of crap all over the place, so, yeah, bad. And Godzilla 2000 is a pretty good movie. Definitely a very step up in quality from the 1998 film, though I will admit it is not the perfect film. It just kind of has like a few plots that don't really lead anywhere, though the ending scene is definitely one of my favorite parts. So yeah, Godzilla vs. Megagears is just a mid-movie in my books. It's better than Raids Again since it wasn't really that rushed, but it just felt kind of lazy. It was when the time where Godzilla was kind of like repeating the same things over and over again, and it just kind of felt like the same thing. Yeah, but thankfully they changed it with Godzilla vs. Mothra and King Ghidorah Giant Monsters All Attack, or GMK. Let me tell you, this is one of my favorite Godzilla films of all time, and possibly even better than Mothra vs. Godzilla. This is a really good film, and has a bunch of, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it has a bunch of stories that are really interesting. Godzilla is just perfect in it. It's just so much. If you want to see like Godzilla movie that does something a lot differenter than the other ones, this is a good one. And next up we got Godzilla x Mechagodzilla, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. Let me tell you, this movie is actually kind of good. Now it's not bad, but it's just kind of good, honestly. It's a step down in quality from like the other. It's not actually, no, like I regret saying that. It's a step up in quality from like Godzilla 2000 and Megaguirus. So I give it that, but it's nowhere near as quality as GMK. So yeah, Tokyo SOS is just an okay movie, but not a good one. It's just an okay mid movie in the franchise that actually wait, there we go. It's actually an okay film, but nothing too much to say there. Godzilla Final Wars is definitely, it's not one of my favorites, but it's definitely a good movie. Just because the way I watched it, nothing really, I couldn't really know anything because it was all in Japanese and there was no subtitles, so I couldn't really understand it. But the fights in it were definitely really fun. Definitely a perfect way to end off the Millennium Era and to celebrate Godzilla's 15th anniversary. So I'm putting this into the King tier. Next up, we got Godzilla 2014, and this film is also really fun. Well, not really fun in the sense, it's just kind of dark and brooding. And that's one way I do like Godzilla. But this movie's just not okay. It's good, I'll say. It's just not as good as like the other films, just because those films just felt like they were made by people who knew Godzilla. Like this film also came from people who knew Godzilla, but I just feel like they made him a bit dark, but it still worked. Shin Godzilla is actually not really my favorite film. It's just kind of, I feel like it's a bit overrated in my books, but I think it's a okay movie overall. It's probably like the best okay movie. It's not my favorite film in the franchise. It's just an okay movie. I do really like Godzilla's design in it. I think it's very disturbing, but I just think that there's a bunch of other films in this franchise. If you like Shin Godzilla, then go ahead and like it. I can't stop you. Either way, next up is the anime trilogy, and I have not watched either of these three films, but what I go on, they just seem a bit okay in my books. They're not just bad, they're just okay. So I didn't watch those. I never got around to watching those, but next up is Godzilla King of the Monsters, and I have to say, this is peak MonsterVerse in my books. Honestly, I think this deserves into the God, but not as good as these other films. This film just kind of felt like it was a modern recreation of, like, the Showa films a little bit. Like, you have all the monsters teaming up against, like, an evil monster that is just gonna destroy the world, and they all have to stop him. But that is just a really fun movie. It's probably my favorite out of the MonsterVerse. Well, it's not the one I revisit the most, it's definitely the one that is my favorite. Next up is Godzilla vs. Kong, and this movie is actually okay. Hey, actually, no, it's actually good. It's actually a okay movie, but it's nowhere near as good as the Godzilla, as the 62 one, since that is a classic. But Godzilla vs. Kong is just an okay film. It's definitely the mid of the MonsterVerse, kind of, because the fights in it were amazing. Like, it was really well choreographed, but the humans were just okay. And I'm kind of hoping that they would fix all these problems in the new Empire, like the new one. And last but totally not least, we have the final Godzilla film to rank, and this is Godzilla Minus One. And I'm not going to talk about spoilers since no one has really seen this, since it is kind of new in the U.S. But this is an instant God film. I don't even know I don't know what to place it, honestly. Actually, you know what? It's actually going into the top of the God, because I won't talk about spoilers, because if I talk about them, then everyone would probably know what would happen in the movie. But this movie is honestly really good. The story is really neat. The characters are really well developed, and Godzilla himself is just amazing. I won't talk about the whole film too much because it's basically new in the U.S. and I don't want to spoil anything. But just to clarify, this film is better than Disney's Wish, even though that film was built on $2 million, but this film was only on $15 million, and it still looks better. So yeah, this film is just amazing. And there we go. We got the entire Godzilla films ranked. So we'll place them. I'll go by to see which films that we ranked and see like all of them that I put in. So in the God tier we have Godzilla Minus One, GMK, Mothra vs. Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Destroyer, the original 1954 Godzilla, Godzilla King of the Monsters. In the King tier we have Godzilla vs. Megalon, Godzilla Final Wars, Destroy All Monsters, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, Son of Godzilla. In the good tier, we have Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, we got King Kong vs. Godzilla, got Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, Godzilla 2000, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Godzilla 2014, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, Godzilla Horror of the Deep, Godzilla vs. Gigan, Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, Invasion of Astro Monster. Next up, we got the OK tier, which has Shin Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Godzilla Tokyo SOS, Godzilla vs. Mothra, Terror of Mechagodzilla, All Monsters Attack. In the mid tier, we have Godzilla 2000 and Godzilla Raids Again. In the bad tier, we just have Godzilla 1998. In the didn't watch category, I have The Return of Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Biollante, and the free anime films. And that was it. If you want me to do more tier lists in the future, because I am planning to do a Christmas one very soon, just because of the holidays. So, if you want me to do that, leave in the comments below. But either way, I'll see you all in the next video, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.